I'm so excited to have this guy on the podcast today. He is a conservative. He's a Christian. He's a content creator. His website, heckoffcommie.com, is the place to go for commentary and interviews on news, culture, and politics. John Doyle, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
So true. I'm good. I'm finally experiencing like true Texas weather. It's finally like, what, 50 degrees?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I just moved from Michigan, so.
You just moved here? Oh, okay.
I was told that I actually brought the Michigan weather to Texas.
Yeah, I was told that I brought the New York weather from Texas, and I was like, I'm really, really sorry. But but then, you know, as soon as Ted Cruz got back, it's all of a sudden warmer, and people say, it, you know, it didn't help, but maybe it helps that he went to Cancun.
Maybe.
I want to know, John, have you, like I was talking to Sarah Gonzalez yesterday. She does a show on the Blaze, and she's born and raised from out here in Texas, was raised with like conservative and Christian values. Were you the same way, or did you kind of journey?
My parents voted Republican, but it wasn't really discussed in our household. I mean, my dad would occasionally go on a rant with his like paraphrasing of whatever he heard Mark Levin or Sean Hannity say, or Rush Limbaugh, rest in peace, something like that. But I didn't really get into it until maybe about 2013, 2014. Actually, a little bit. I think it would have been the second Obama election where I really started to get into it, started reading more books about it, following the news. But then with the Trump election, that's when I really got into it, like with the day-to-day cycle, I guess you could say. And that's where I've been ever since. Yeah,
me too. Well, I voted for Trump in
Should I look there?
I don't know. Like, okay. Look wherever you want. I know our camera is like up here. I just did a Heil by accident. It's like above us. Then, this is a wonky setup. We're in like a very beautiful kind of common area of where John lives.
Well, hey, when you're a B-list Nazi YouTuber, you can afford the finer things,
I
guess.
This is beautiful. I mean, if this is what being a B-list Nazi YouTuber will get you, I mean, sign me up. I want to know why are you hated by, liberals?
I get a lot of,
but I mean, we'll say liberals in general. That'll be like the sort of umbrella term.
It's interesting because there's almost an inherent hatred that you'll have espoused towards you as like any sort of right-wing figure. I've noticed that I get a lot more vicious and consistent hatred than your Steven Crowders or your Ben Shapiro's even. And I think it's because a lot of what I talk about isn't even like policy or politics. It sort of transcends into what I would regard as like the immaterial things like faith and discipline and really cultivating your potential and becoming like a better person. And I think that tends to highlight a lot of insecurity that manifests, I would say, disproportionately on the left. And they almost feel as though they have to attack me so as to like alleviate that insecurity or the guilt that they feel with, the behaviors and lifestyles that they choose and things like that. And especially because, I'm a young white guy. I'm kind of arrogant.
How old are you?
21.
Wow, for 21, like you really have your shit together.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like, they hate the smirk, and I kind of have this I guess aura about me that really gets under their skin. And so there's literally a subculture of these people who exist who every time I make a video, they do their response, and they've got their couple dozen or couple hundred people watching and just all trying to bully me, which you can't bully me because I'm too epic. You just can't. It doesn't work like that.
Why are you not able to be bullied? Like, what? I mean,
because you can't bully. Like, in order to bully somebody, it like almost presupposes that you are in a position above them at which you could punch down. But I'm just not. Like, I'm at the top, so you can't, like, they're punching up and they're trying their best, but it's like you look at these people, they're all fat, they're all disgusting. You see their girlfriends or their boyfriends or whatever appear on stream with them, they're all gross too. And it's like by what metric are you better than me? Like, I mean, not to, one of my greatest qualities is of course my humility.
And you say this without ego, right? I mean, like,
it's not ego if it's true. It's not ego if it's true. I say this not in a braggadocious way, but it's like, like for example, in the video that I just did about pornography,
which I loved, and I'm not done listening to it, but I highly recommend it. Like, I'm 3/4 of the way through.
One of the things that I talk about a lot on my channel is sexual morality, and I think it's really important for young men to not exploit their charisma or their charm or whatever to go and hook up with attractive women. And so the people that criticize me accuse me of being like an incel, or they say that I just need to get laid or something. But then you look at the girls that they're like dating, and I think the phrase I used was that they look like defective Pokemon. And so like that was like what I was wondering is like, are you really winning? Like,
Snorlax or what's happening?
Exactly.
Here?
Like you've got these like really fat guys, and they're like so consumed by their lust that they're having sex with these really gross women, but they think that they're beating me because they're at least having sex or whatever, as though like, you know, me and one of these guys go out to a bar or something, and like the girls are going to be coming up to me and being like, who's your friend over there? Like, can you introduce me? And he's like,
yeah,
just
probably not.
Disgusting
they
guy.
Would probably come to you because like you don't seem like somebody who's gonna like slip something in a girl's drink, or you're not going to be like,
I cherish women, nothing but respect for women.
Yeah, like, and that comes across, and I'm just like I feel like your aunt or something. I'm like, you're such an impressive young man. Like, you're very confident, you're smart. Like, do you attribute a lot of this to how you were raised?
No, I mean, I don't know, maybe. I mean, my mom, of course, you know, the mothers and the grandmothers are always, oh, my handsome young man, and you know, you're just perfect and everything about this, things like that. But I don't know. I think I was given the opportunity to explore things that I was most passionate about and really like allowed to kind of excel in those things, whether that was sports, like I played baseball, I ran track, music, I was involved with like the orchestra, I played drums. And so I had a chance to be we had this thing called the electronic orchestra, which was like literally electric violins and cellos that play rock music. So I got to be the drummer for that too, because I really like drums. So things like that, I guess, kind of allowed me to sort of develop this ego of mine. And then because
you were good at these things.
Yeah, and then it translated very fluidly into politics, which I was also pretty good at, so to speak.
If I were going to guess what electric instrument you played, I would have said electric violin. I don't know why, because you kind of look like my brother, and he played the regular violin or the
I played cello in the symphony orchestra, and the teacher was a friend of mine, and he knew that, like, you know, I would have rather played in the band, so I could have played like drums and then like in the marching band or something. And so he kind of like threw me that bone and gave me the opportunity as an 8th grader to join the high school electronic orchestra, so like I could play drums and stuff, which was cool because he knew that like that's what I really wanted to do. So that was a cool opportunity. Those
opportunities are the best, like when you're a little bit younger and somebody recognizes a skill in you and they can kind of, put you with a more advanced group. I gotta take these bracelets off. Just like, it's too much ASMR for you audio listeners. I'm bringing this up like just to your point, like when I was a gymnast when I was younger, and like when I was in like 7th grade, I got put in the varsity high school, like gymnastics, whatever team. And that was cool. That gave me a lot of confidence. And same thing, I was like very good at diving as a youth, and like just being focused on a sport, like really kept me out, I think, of so many bad things, and like hanging with the wrong crowd. Like I found like when I got really into diving and like practicing like 3 hours a day and on travel teams and stuff, that's when I was like less inclined to like hang out with the girls who were like blowing dudes, and like less likely to like be putting like, you know, not that there's anything wrong with putting like colored mascara in your hair like in class, but I just feel like certain things change when you have a discipline. Yeah. And I feel like as I watch like, I don't know, the next generation of kids like growing into adults, like late teens, early 20s, because I know how I was raised. I know like when I was in my 20s, it's this larger theme of like liberal culture that I want to talk about with you, because you have a really good handle on it. And I love on your website, people can hire you to do speaking engagements. And True. One of the topics that you are available to discuss are the consequences of leftism, which I think is fascinating because like when I remember just like being like all through my 20s, it's like they just it's interesting the ways in which not having responsibility, being a huge slut, like all these things were like made cool, you know, and everything in culture, and your friends kind of support it. It's like, you know, what they're not making cool are like any conservative values. Like once I feel like a lot of people hear even the word conservative and they kind of shut down. People hear the word Christianity or religion and they kind of shut down. But I feel like for me, it took like reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life or whatever, that made me go like, oh, not only does he have like the vibes of this like dad I never had, like giving me the lessons I needed to have, like take care of your shit first. Like anybody who's read the book, like, you know what I'm talking about. But I want to know, like, that's what I think is so interesting, because no one really says like the consequences of leftism in a broader way. And I feel like it means more than just religious or not religious. You know
yeah, I'm trying to remember what I was thinking when I wrote that. I think I like not the I guess train of thought, but I think when I wrote that, I was like making a little bit of a nod to a certain manifesto from a certain philosopher who I think is in prison right now.
Ted Kaczynski?
Maybe. Because I think the opening line of his manifesto was like the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. And so I was like, leftism and its consequences or something. I guess I thought that was funny whenever I wrote that. 2-3 years ago. But I guess as far as the consequences of leftism are concerned, really what it comes down to, I think, we can talk about economics or things like that, is basically the inevitable destabilization of society, because as conservatives, ignoring tax policy and all these other things that are basically just a means to an end, we're trying to ultimately conserve the stability of the traditional American society. And this is part of the reason why conservatives are all, I mean, they call us reactionaries. We're always reacting to the narratives that are set by the left, because we're basically always going to be playing defense on things, whereas the left exists to accelerate the cultural entropy of the society. And so this is why we get into things like the degradation of the family or gender roles or any one of these social institutions that used to bind the nation together. And so when that happens, the society is going to destabilize to a point where that bigger government has to come in literally in order to keep the society from collapsing with things like surveillance or
like government needs to be your daddy because like there's no daddies within each family. I know that's like a mega like overstating, like that's very generally speaking. Like a woman, you can be your own daddy, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be like male, female, but we're talking about like a strong family unit, like is its own sort of, I don't know, company in a way. It's its own, it is its own like little government, and like, but it's left up to the people instead of like the government deciding everything for everybody.
Yeah. And I don't know if I would go as far as to say that this has been an intentional sort of orchestrated plan to destabilize the community to the point where it doesn't exist anymore, so as to allow for government to like come in. But I will say I saw something recently. It was a photograph of, I think it was in the 1800s or something, where there was an elderly woman who had her husband, she was a widow, and she had her husband's farm, and she had like defaulted on a very insignificant loan or something. And so someone was coming to like take possession and like seize the asset or something. And a bunch of men in the community came and like de facto arrested this guy and said, no, you're not taking this someone's farm.
That's so hot. Like that's like doing it for me.
That's the thing. It's like, as men, we have our laws and we have law and order, but it's like you see that and it's wrong. And, maybe you can get educated to the point where you can rationalize, well, actually, she shouldn't have made the loan. But it's like, you don't do that, especially to an elderly woman, a widow, let alone. And so the men, they arrested that guy. But now like the community doesn't exist anymore. At least, especially, this is like why a lot of people think I'm like a white supremacist. I actually like white people I criticize the most, maybe just because I grew up in like relatively white areas. It was pretty diverse, Southeast Michigan, like outside of Detroit. But like I know for a fact that if that happened and someone tried to repo my mom's house or something like that or seize that asset, my neighbors, my white neighbors would look out and they go out next door and what's happening. They wouldn't go and do anything about it. They would just gossip about it. And I did a live stream too talking about that sort of breakdown of community, specifically in America, which historically has been a white country. But one thing that I respect about cultures that have come and sort of set up their own little communities in America, not assimilating, but they have their own communities. It's like I know for a fact that if I called a white woman a bitch, I'd be fine. Her brother would probably even agree with me. But if I said the same thing to like a Chaldean girl, I look outside and 9 of her brothers would be outside and they're gonna beat the shit out of me. It's like that.
Wait, what is that? Is that Indian?
Chaldean? I think they're northern Iraqi.
Okay. So like Middle Eastern.
Yeah, or like, I mean, you'd see that with any Middle Eastern family, Hispanics, maybe not as much blacks, but like anything.
Maybe Italians.
Oh, definitely Italians. Yeah, like my roommate.
Like a very Guido.
It's the same thing. Like they have that sort of, and maybe it's a result because they've had to consolidate their presence in America because they're minorities, but they've still retained that sense of identity and community that white people just haven't. So
why do you think that has happened?
Specifically in white people?
Yeah.
I think we're not allowed to acknowledge that we exist as white people. It's like, what's the line?
Like white culture is seen as bad, or anything that's white.
Well, it depends on it depends on how audacious you are. If you want to get away with it, you'll say Western civilization or like Western culture, but like you mean white culture. It's like
mean hot dogs. Yeah, you mean football.
And that doesn't mean that like non-white people can't participate in those cultures successfully. It just means that like without white people or like Western people, European descending people, the likelihood of that perpetuating is just less likely. It just doesn't seem to be practical. So I think that, the line I was going to say was like in Joker, it's like for my whole life, I didn't even know if even really existed, but I do. And people are starting to notice. It's like the same thing with like white people. We're sort of realizing
that's really funny.
It is, we've been made to forget about our heritage and our ancestors, and we're told that we're evil and racist and all these things. And we've got that pressure on us. And now we're like, wait a minute, we're not actually evil because we're white, and our ancestors actually did pretty good things. They did terrible things, but not more terrible or even proportionally more terrible than other people did. And we're kind of realizing that, like, wait a minute, we actually don't have to feel guilty for looking like this. You know, we can have Black pride or Hispanic pride. I'm not going to even say it because I don't want to get canceled, but you can't even acknowledge, let alone have pride in the fact that, like, you exist as a group of people. So
white pride or white power. I'm just kidding.
Your words, your words.
I just think it's funny, like, any group of people that, like, they get shit on for long enough, like, yeah, it almost takes that for you to find what you, I don't know, what you treasure and what you like about, you know, where you came from, your group, whatever.
Yeah, those are things I would never have even thought about that if I were not forced to. People telling me that, like, you have no claim to this country. Everyone's an immigrant here. So it's like, okay, so I go to Ancestry. I find out that my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather came over here in the 1830s from Ireland to Pennsylvania, and then his son moved to Michigan. So, like, I can trace my roots in this country back to before the Civil War. Wow. But I'm supposed to listen to, you know, some, frankly, immigrant first generation come over here to attend an American college and then tell me that, like, my stake in this country and caring about it is illegitimate because of something that they were taught by a Marxist. It's just like, I can't buy that. Like, as a man, you know, if you can erode all of the things that matter, be that faith, family, community, culture, nationality, heritage, country, just anything, like, you will put him in a place where he's completely displaced and lost, and he has nothing to dedicate himself to that he feels is greater than himself. He has no purpose. And you just create this, like, society of just completely nihilistic and amoral men that are ultimately weak and look a lot like, you know, some of these, like, BuzzFeed employees that we see, the Try Guys, I think they're called, that think that just because they can go get avocados for brunch, like, 3 times a week, and, you know, when the new Marvel movie comes out, like, they think that, like, that's what it means to be a man and, like, to be alive. It's just, like, disgusting to me. Yeah.
What does it mean? And it's amazing that you have this much perspective and maturity at 21 years old.
So true.
Like, for real,
So
it's
true.
like, it's blowing me away. Like, I don't know. I just feel like most people I know in their 20s are not even thinking about these things, and they're not thinking about their future. And it is interesting because, like, our friend Elijah Schaefer was just here earlier, and he said, oh, you guys should talk about, like, I think it was some study that came out that, like, guys is like testosterone, or their sperm count is down. Sperm
count's down. Our testosterone is down 40% in the last 40 years.
How does that happen?
There's a few things. A lot of it is lifestyle related. So we're more sedentary. The foods that we're eating have phytoestrogens in them. The plastics, for example, that package our food, BPAs, things like that, like literally they're not exactly estrogens, but your body reacts to it in the same way. Like, it thinks it's estrogen, things like that. And then also there, not only in lifestyle as far as how sedentary are, but things like pornography, for example, too, will lower, like, your baseline testosterone as well. Excessive masturbation, things like that.
What's excessive for the listeners?
I don't know. You know, I feel like the listener knows at, like, a certain point what's considered to be excessive. Basically, you know,
once a day, is that excessive?
With pornography, like, you saw the video, what I think goes on is a lot of people think that pornography exists to supplement their, like, sexual urges. Like, I need to do this, and so I'm going to use pornography to, like, help me. But as you become addicted, which you inevitably do to pornography, just the way that it rewires your neurochemistry, what tends to happen is that you're addicted to that dopamine and to the pornography. And so then you sort of, like, that's your priority. And then, like, you know, the process by which you get to that is sort of an accessory. So when people quit pornography, what they find is, like, they actually aren't slaves and to be subject to these desires and urges, and, like, they actually don't need to masturbate, like, every day or, like, even, like, twice a week or something, because it's just, like, not that much of a priority. It's just, like, another urge that you have, just like other urges, and you can transcend and conquer that and not let it affect you and, you know, be a subject to it.
So it sounds like you're talking about, like, our bodies basically have not evolved to the like point where our technology has evolved. Like, your brain is still acting and operating from, like, a caveman space. Basically, like, your most important urges are, right, like, being fed, sex. Because as a guy, you're like, I gotta reproduce.
Every woman must be pregnant. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is, like, coincidentally, I'm sure, but the people who are pulling the strings have made it such that we are addicted to food and pornography. And so we're all fat, and men, at least, are all addicted to porn. I think it's like 70% of US adults are fat. Over a third of them are obese, things like that, which are unprecedented. You know, people on the left, you know, the progressives will say that we're making progress as a nation because I can be judged less for being a degenerate or for whatever weird lifestyle I have, or I can, you know, have cheaper access to flat screen televisions. But it's like, what about the health of the nation? Like the life expectancy for the first time ever in recorded history has actually been decreasing as of the last 2 years because of drug overdoses and suicide. People are spiritually ill. People are overweight and out of shape. I watched a video from, I think the 50s or 60s of young men in their high school gym class. Back when it was like gym and not like physical education. These kids are all like chads. They're like all like jacked, like lean. Yeah, I was like,
hello.
Yeah, no, like I'm not like
time machine out.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's interesting too because I'm not like like shredded, but like I'm in pretty good shape.
You're in good shape. Yeah, you might be a chad.
You see my shoulder definition in the shirt and everything.
As he flexes.
I wasn't flexing. I was just saying.
It looks pretty good in the camera.
Yeah. Anyway,
you're doing great.
Thank you. The point being, it's like men have devolved to such a state where like, even somebody that's, 12, 14% body fat who can like bench their body weight is like a chad or whatever. Whereas back then, like all these dudes were just like in good shape. And, if they were,
they weren't eating shitty food. They weren't like,
because it wasn't subsidized by the government.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. So sad.
They weren't throwing back sodas.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it seems like, I feel like we need to make almost like, and I would have never thought like years ago, like I would have been into conservative values, but I swear to God, I really took like reading Jordan Peterson's book and meeting like a couple libertarians. And I really started to think, cause like I came out of college, like full on card carrying feminist, registered Democrat. I was so that way. And that's why I identify a lot with like the Brennan Straka, like walk away movement.
Yeah.
It's like, that's been my journey. I feel like I'm just catching up to like where you're like only 21. Mm-hmm. But I think like the larger issue is like, okay, so how do we make things that will make the health of the nation better, or even the health of the individual better, like hard work, discipline. Basically, these are kind of conservative values. I think it's like, how do we, and I think it's already starting to happen, but it's like, to me, I think the solution is making these concepts like seem cool. And like, in order to do that, we have to kind of like separate ourselves from like the instant gratification culture, because if you're constantly, and you said this in your porn video,
porn commentary video, very important.
And you can't focus on your long-term goals if you are constantly being seduced by your desires. Like you can't, it's just like, it's a quick fix. It's like, it's self-soothing. It's like anybody it's all kind of the same, right? Like if you're addicted to porn or you're an alcoholic or you're addicted to drugs, it's like, you're just trying to get out of the now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that people, and this, I wouldn't say I get a lot of flack for this, but this is something that a lot of people just wish weren't true, which is that the majority of people, even in America, I think don't have agency, which doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that they basically exist to respond to the narratives and to the trends, and they will never be at a point where they can think critically about things. And frankly, I don't even know that they should be expected to. I think that people should be able to live in a society that doesn't want them to pursue self-destruction, basically. And I think that the way that our society is structured now, the predominant narratives, especially for young men, are that your life should be oriented towards convenience, not cultivating virtue or discipline, whatever makes you, able to sit around and do whatever, and passive income, for example, even with those who have higher work ethics. How can you make money without actually having to work? Things like that. And it's tough because, there used to be like really masculine role models for men who maybe even weren't, the most upstanding morally, but people like James Bond, or these sort of cultural figures, John Wayne, Sean Connery.
Marlon Brando.
Oh yeah, my mom would like that. Yeah. I didn't mean to insult you by saying my mom would like that.
I know. I feel like I have more in common with your mom.
But things like that, it's like now who do men have to like look up to? Is like, I like this guy, maybe like Marvel superheroes, maybe, but even that is just like a very sort of watered down archetype of like the bad guy does the bad and he saves it. Different things like that we don't really have anymore because we're told that masculinity is toxic, and like the only way to be healthy with your masculinity is basically to be a man, which has no definition because anyone can identify as a man, and then be like willing to talk about your feelings and cry more and things like that, which is really just like a way to like take men who are already beaten down because they've been displaced in society for the last 50 years and then tell them like, shh, you should cry more. You should give in to be weak and buckle under the pressure and things like that, which is kind of a malicious representation of what masculinity actually is. Because if you talk to like any man who would be regarded as like masculine and you cry in front of him like, hey, my mother just died, he's not going to look at you and be like, man up, what are you?
No, nobody does that. That's not like real people don't react that way.
The whole point of like this idea of being stoic and not showing emotion isn't because you're afraid of that. It's just because like, you know, that like women, for example, are emotional, and women need to know that there's stability. And so if there's a burglar breaking in and the wife looks at you and you're freaking the fuck out too, like that's bad. You need to be calm.
But
and, like,
not that men, like, I mean, if you're genuinely feeling like you're freaking out, like you should be able to feel your feelings. It's like, I don't know. At the same time, like if a guy broke into like me and my boyfriend's apartment, I would be like, fuck, I would sort of look to him because he's 6 feet tall. And I would be like, I would hope that he would step up, you know, not that like women can't step up either. It's like, it's so tricky because it's like, I want men to feel like they can express themselves. But here's the thing. It's like, if you don't innately have like this stoicism, or like, you know, you kind of just hold your feelings down, like if you are not naturally like that, I don't know. I think what I'm trying to say is like, you don't want to like force or make guys feel like they all have to react or behave a certain way. I would say the bigger problem is probably like the opposite. Like the idea is that like there's this pressure on guys to like sort of like pussify themselves and like kind of step down from making themselves physically, mentally strong. Yeah.
I think part of it too is that men, what was I going to say about talking about feelings?
The
burglar.
Women are emotional.
Women are emotional. True. What was it? I lost it. Keep going.
Okay. Burglar. Women look to men to kind of like have their shit together. They like something sturdy. Stability.
It was going to be something about like part of that as a man being a lot of it, and women I think tend to have a hard time, like, because their frame of reference for like feelings is like very extroverted and like, I want to talk about this. It isn't so much that men like we just want to talk about it, but we just feel like it's against society's expectations and we can't. It's like literally like we have nothing in us, at least in my experience and the guys I know. It's like if something is like really bothering us, we'll talk about it sometimes, but like with real like insignificant stuff, we just have nothing in us that like it's like, oh, I want to talk about it. It's just kind of like, okay, and we're almost predisposed or have a proclivity towards kind of like internalizing things and like, you know, dealing with it in our own way or just like through silence or whatever. And I think with a lot of women, that's indicative of something like wrong or something that maybe is not good for like their mental health, so to speak. But with men, for the most part, I think it is basically just kind of the natural state of our being, and it isn't exactly detrimental to us. And also, you know, for literally all of history, this idea that like men aren't allowed to talk about their feelings, that's just been iron law. But men were fine and they weren't killing themselves in record numbers. It's only since the 1970s that all of a sudden this has happened. Coincidentally, the same period of time where men were told that, oh, you can actually talk about your feelings and things like that. It's like if that were actually the problem, you'd expect these rates of suicide and deaths of despair to be basically consistent throughout history, but they're just not. So something is going wrong with men in the last half century that has nothing to do with whether or not we feel as though we can like pour our heart out to somebody over brunch or something.
Like if that were the case, it would just be like, oh, every man you know would have a therapist. It'd be like, oh, therapists are crushing it now that they can talk about their feelings finally. And I think there is kind of like a crisis with men, and it's like we can't even talk about it either, but just observing from culture, it's like I always say like, oh, the future is female, like, and I just like I love like tagging that back on Twitter, like if I find an example of like, I don't know, I just generalities, I just feel like it's, you know, it's part of this like, you know, woke culture thing. And I don't know, but it's very scary because I feel like little boys are like growing up, or even like men in their 20s feeling like, I don't know, like stifled and beaten down. And when you look at the larger picture, like, okay, conspiracy theory wise, like, okay, you know, the culture, the government, they're trying to make men weaker so that the families are weaker, and that way the government can take over just a little bit more. Like, is that crazy to think that way? Or do you feel like it's just a result of things like more porn, more junk food?
I don't know if it's intentional, but the results are the same nonetheless. I mean, like with porn and junk food and marijuana, even that all makes us more impulsive and more pacified and therefore more susceptible to propaganda. And, you know, like with the virus that's mentioned on your laptop sticker, for example, everybody basically bought into that religiously. And if you even question the narrative on that, then you would be bullied and deplatformed for people in our line of work, for example. So, I mean, not that I think I had a segment in my video too, my porn commentary video about this too, where I said that not that I'm the guy, but if I were the guy who was in charge of doing things, I would probably promote things like junk food, pornography, marijuana, alcoholism, basically get men really weak, displace them from society. And then conversely do the same thing to women, objectify them, make them into whores. And then I went through like a whole list of things that have basically happened in our culture since after World War II, and kind of discussed how those things would lead inevitably to the collapse of society within the next 200, not even 200 years, in the next 100 years. And that doesn't mean, you know, society's collapse, like everything's on fire, Red Dawn, World War Z scenario. It just means that we exist as a nation of people with nothing to bind us, except for that we're all consumers, and we're kind of waiting for some nation like China to come conquer us, which is probably going to happen. That's the other thing too. We used to have our military. That was the last hope, is the military. And then you look, in the military's basically gay now, and you've got all these women in there and all these gay people, and they're doing TikTok dances, and MacArthur is turning in his grave, and it's just like, yeah, we're down pretty bad.
Yeah, I haven't even thought of the military, because I just like don't know anybody who's like currently in the military right now. And you just hear like, oh, well, like I figure like there's as many trans people in the military as there are just that I know, which is probably just like a handful. I'm like, you figure it's still pretty strong. But I think it's so fascinating what you're talking about, like how men and women have been, it almost seems like the dials have been turned down on men, like way down, like masculinity, right? Like physical strength down, just the things that make you like a healthy, good man have been like turned way down. And it's like women, I'm trying to figure out like metaphor wise, like have women been turned up? Like, yeah, the sexuality has been turned way up, but it's like, but it's for the express purpose of like hitting that novelty seeking part of like a man's like sexual part of his brain.
Yeah, it's very pernicious, because, and that's why too, if you ask anybody my age or even within 10 years older, like to define like what masculinity or femininity is, they have no idea, because it's never been displayed to them. They have no examples from which to draw in their own lives, which is why it is so easy for them in the predominant narrative to get away with saying things like gender roles are constructs, they're fluid. You know, there is no masculine or feminine. You can just interchange and be whatever you want on the spectrum, because nobody can really disprove that biologically or anecdotally or whatever, because they know that these things are true intuitively, as we all do. But when the people that want to uproot those things take the year to learn all the gender theory and things like that, we don't really have arguments ready to refute that, because we just have no example we're basically in a spot where we have to justify what we know is true, but we don't know how to do that, because we felt so long that we would never need to, that now when we actually have to, in order to like maintain control of society, we're just like totally screwed.
Right. Like we don't have stats and studies just on kind of like human nature.
Yeah.
Because we've been trying to prove, I think, the opposite for a while.
Yeah.
And it's like you should, and just like how we both kind of were raised, like your strengths should be fed. Like the people around you should be like, it's okay. The things that you're strong at, it's good. You should lean into those and work on those more, because we all have like unique strengths as human beings. And I just feel like the men that are like innately masculine have not been encouraged to like develop their like sort of masculine traits. So it's like, okay, if you have a society full of people that are not being encouraged to like strengthen their own strengths. I mean, I'm saying that word too much, but it's just, I don't know. I think we're really fucked up, I guess.
Yeah. I saw a headline a few months ago that was like, I think from The Onion, it was like, man who would have been, this is the only love seat we have in plaid, says man who would have been revered warrior 2,000 years ago or something like that. Men have just been so feminized in the workforce, and we're sitting in these cubes. And that's why movies like Fight Club are so popular. It's not, the movie was marketed as like a movie literally about a fight club, because advertisers and promoters didn't think that people would want to go see this commentary on the emasculation of men in a capitalist society and things like that. But that's like really what the film was about. And that's why it resonates so much. And no one can really articulate like why it speaks to them so much, at least young men can't, but everyone knows like when it's pointed out to them, like this is why, because it's a commentary on this thing. Like you've got this guy who's unnamed because he represents the American consumer, and he goes and he devotes himself to his possessions and things like that. And he literally joins a club where he takes joy in getting the shit beaten out of him, because at least like there's some chaos and he feels something, and he goes and blows up the credit card building and things like that. And that's why it was so popular, is because men have been so emasculated, and we feel as though we have like no purpose in our lives, where we're literally, it's the same thing too with, I don't know if you caught this, but my generation and the one immediately before it had this big fantasy of the zombie apocalypse when they were teenagers. We just want that. We are literally willing to fantasize about the complete destruction of society, everything that we know gone, everyone that we love gone, just so that we can have some chaos and like something to do, as opposed to like this structure of like, go to work, go to school, the monotony of like the cubicle life.
People love chaos. That's why people deep down like don't pay their bills on time. That's why people deep down, like maybe you're hooking up with a bunch of people at the same time. You're like, how could this happen? How could they find out about each other? And it's like deep down, it's like, okay, you're not taking steps to not have chaos, which means you're like leaving space like for chaos to happen. It's interesting you mentioned that because you're 21. You should be at this, like really the next 15 years of your life as a typical like American male, right? You're 21 right now. Should be about like hooking up, getting as much puss as you can. And it blows me away that you're not about that. You are like not into hookup culture, but you feel that way at an age where it's like you barely would have scratched the surface on it to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always just kind of made me depressed. Like the constant, I don't know why, but like like even, you know, I went to a couple parties in like high school and there would be kids there like doing things like that. And it just like made me sad. So I would just like stop going to parties. What made you sad about it? I don't know. I think it was just like seeing, like you could look in their eyes. They like look dead. Like I went to, we played this game called Water Wars. Did you have that at your high school?
No.
So the seniors, you all break off into teams of 4 and like there's a bracket and every week you go and get a different team. And so you can't play in school, but outside of school, you try and squirt each other with water. It's like elimination. So fun. So kids are hiding in people's garages, all sorts of stuff like that. So we went to the last tiebreaker. No one wanted to play. They're such pussies. My team was the only team that wanted to play. Everyone else wanted to hide in their houses the whole week. So it ended up just being like a lot of tiebreakers. And so we got out because of a tiebreaker, even though we were actually getting other, whatever. I'm over it. No, I'm not.
Clearly you're over it. Yeah.
Point being, the last tiebreaker that was going to decide the whole championship or whatever was a game of water pong at this girl's house. And so all the like kids were there and I walked in with this other kid and, you know, they're playing this game and I'm like looking around, seeing all these kids that I've known for like years and they've all got their jewels, their like little nicotine things. They're all drinking and taking like hits of just various other things. And that's the other thing. I'm kind of a boomer when it comes to like this culture. I don't even know what they're doing with the substances or whatever. They've all got these like different pens and
I didn't realize everybody's got a pen. Everyone's got a jewel. Yeah. Like I thought like, okay, is that just for like marijuana? Is it just for like weed smokers? But no, it's like they've replaced cigarettes, I guess.
Yeah. And it sounds kind of cheesy and like I'm concern trolling, but I don't know. Like like I look at these kids who, you know, I've known since we were in middle school, elementary school, and, you know, I talk to them and, oh, I want to be this, I want to do this. And they're there and they have these like dead eyes and they're just like passing around these various like dopamine inducing things. It just makes me depressed. And I don't know, I've never been into party culture. So I never got into like the hookup culture either. That was just always like very like kind of, I don't know.
Have you had hookups or you just judge them from afar?
We'll talk about that at a later time. Just, unimportant. It does not dismiss the truth of what I'm saying, which is that
dabbled.
I think that no. I think that as a man, to participate in like hookup culture is almost indicative of the state that we're in as men, like we talked about later. Like as a man, if like you can get a girl to like hook up with you, how does that make you a better man? Like all you have proved is that like you can get this woman. Yeah. Well, even that though, it's like all you have proved is that you can get this woman to give you access to her body by some arbitrary metric that she's established for herselst, or maybe you've gotten her drunk enough, or like
buying
whatever.
2 drinks is usually what it was for me. Yeah, it was like a large Greek salad. You're in.
Okay, so it's interesting because it's like, you know, as a man, like what makes you valuable as a man, or, you know, your status, your drive, your ambition, your intelligence, things like that. Those are all things that make you a better man, your discipline, your morality, etc. And so all of that exists independently of whether or not women find you attractive. And so what you have now is you have men forgetting about, or perhaps even ignoring all of those other things that would actually make them better men, and thinking that they can go like take courses on how to pick up girls and like run game. They think that if they can get the most notches on their belt, so to speak, that is actually like what makes them a better man. Whereas the men who are like actually good men and building those things that we just talked about, women are going to be attracted to them automatically regardless, because that's just how it works. But they don't feel as though they have to like really capitalize on that, you know, those opportunities to actually like make themselves better men. So I think that focusing on like hookup culture is a very like female oriented view, which, you know, not to say that's bad, because of course I'm all about equality, but it almost like seeds ground to women that like, you're the one who decides whether or not we're going to.
The woman is the one who decides?
I think in the hookup culture, yes, because it's like, you're basically giving women the opportunity, like in hookups, for example, because it's just like, you know, it's hooking up, there's like no strings attached or whatever. So all you have to do is be able to like, oh yeah, you have, you know, this amount of arbitrary brands that you're wearing on your person, and therefore that's emblematic of status, and so I'm going to hook up with you or whatever. I just think it's wrong. And I don't think it like makes you a better man So
it's like if the tree is strong and a tree is good and it's got strong branches, great leaves, birds are going to be like, oh, I want to make a fucking nest in this tree.
Yeah.
This is a good looking tree. And like, would you equate like, is it the same for women? Like if we're using the tree example, like, right, if you work on your own like values, what makes you strong, and like, right, strengthening yourself, your self-esteem, like whatever it is, going to therapy, figuring out your toxic patterns or whatever, like, all right, getting your shit together, getting off whatever you're addicted to. Do you feel like that the same is true for men and women? Like, be the tree and people will come to you, or is it different for women?
I think it's different for women, but I also, like we were talking about earlier with the state of man and sort of the degradation. What's interesting is like 100 years ago or even 70 years ago, to be a man of status was to be a man who was well liked in his community, who, you know, did well in his job and who went to church and was like a moral, disciplined man who then, you know, the woman's family would approve of and things like that. So that's like how that would have set up. That man would have had opportunities with women like because of that, because he was like a good man, cultivated those traits. Whereas now, because women, you know, they have no societal pressure to be, you know, sexually conservative or restrained, that's all gone, to where now like the traits that like they can decide with men is like, okay, money, or which
so much about money.
Yeah,
it's like,
but it's not even like money in the sense of like you have ambition and you can provide for me. It's like you can convey artificial status with these brands or these cars. It's not so much about money as a means to the ends of like providing for a family. It's like a worship of money in itself. It's like greed and like things like that, gluttony,
being a baller, as they say.
Yeah. With women, I think though, especially, and I think men all, especially once they get out of this little hookup phase, it's like once they mature a lot, they'll realize that what they really want is like a you know, modest and feminine woman. And those women tend to be the ones that are snatched up pretty early because they don't participate. They don't ride the carousel. They don't go through what my friends and I refer to as the sucking dick and traveling phase. Oh yeah, you've got all these young girls. Literally, it's true, folks. It's true. You've got all these young girls who are like.
You invented this term, or you and your friends?
I mean, me, but they co-opted it. But it's like you've got all these girls who are like, I just want to travel the world. I just like want to travel. They have this weird fixation on traveling, like as though that's a personality. And I like traveling, don't get me wrong. But it's like,
God, yes, I know so weird. Many of these girls. I went to college with all these girls.
And I think that the sucking dick and the traveling are both basically under the same umbrella of them like rejecting maturation, like being tied down. So I'm gonna like suck dick because I'm gonna, you know, reject the the standards of the dying standards of like sexual morality throughout the society, and then also travel.
Like settle down, right?
Yeah,
like settle, right? Like there is this feeling with men and women that you don't want to settle. And like, I think I'm a really good example. Like I spent my whole 20s, like, and I think really only now at 37 am I now being less afraid of the idea of marriage, which is, I kind of fucked up. Like that shouldn't have been the way, you know, but I did. I spent like a lot of years, well, not traveling, but definitely sucking dick. And I just was like, I kind of like prided myself on it. I was like, I'm not, and I don't belong to anybody. Like, and now I look back and I'm like, okay, those issues, I think, because my parents had a bad marriage, and like that was my primary example of marriage. And they were so condescending to each other. They were so passive aggressive to each other. They didn't build each other up. Like my dad didn't build my mom up in the ways that a woman needs to be built up. My mom certainly did not build up my dad in the ways that like men need to be like built up and gassed. You should be gassing each other up, you know? And
boomers?
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, obviously. I mean, they've set such a terrible example for like what a marriage actually should be, which is why I don't have like a.
And it scares you into wanting to do it. So I really get it.
There was a Helen Andrews, I think, is a very smart young woman, just came out with a book called Boomers, and it literally timelines how they like ruined everything. Not even like this petty generational. Your fault, like with housing, education, they ruined everything.
What did they got? I feel like they got houses too easy. Like, I don't know, they got a lot easily, it seemed.
And don't get me wrong, the boomers watching this, we love you, and you're obviously aware of it, but it's like,
you're great.
You guys grew up in the most prosperous time in the history of the world. You had everything handed to you, and you just like ruined it. And this is what I say on my show all the time. Like, you guys were literally too busy getting high and listening to Led Zeppelin 4 to actually like conserve anything in the country, to where now like my generation and your generation are like totally screwed.
Are we in the same generation?
You're 37?
Yeah.
No, I'm 21.
So you're a Gen Z?
Zoomer.
Yes. You're a Zoomer.
Yes.
Okay.
You're like what, Gen X? Millennial?
Thank you. No, no, I'm a millennial. Although I don't really like identify. Like if I could choose like
you don't
my
identify as a millennial.
Yeah, I don't identify.
You reject labels. You're not like other girls.
I'm a they. Yeah. It's interesting. I never thought about this because you're like, oh, well, your parents just like, they had their shit together. They made better choices. And now when you, as an adult, you're like, oh no, this whole generation did get hooked up on a lot of things.
They were terrible. Yeah. They like ruined everything. And I'm just like so angry about it because it's like,
what should they have done?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to play Monday morning quarterback. And I also am not like well read enough on like all the specific things, but like
but we do know that they took a lot of drugs. We do know that like maybe the government had a little something to do with that, you know?
It's just like, it's so sad. We had like such a good purpose. And that's the thing too, like our post-war purpose was like, oh, we're such a free and liberal and tolerant society. We're now going to send our young kids to go die in the sand to promote those same things. Like that's like America's legacy, like as it dies out is basically like, I'm not going to say it, but it's not good.
If you could say it in code, what do you mean?
The gay flag waves at military bases for a reason.
Oh, wow. For real? That's a thing?
Oh, yeah. No, they literally, I forgot exactly what the story was, but like embassies that the U.S. has throughout the world, you know, in countries where gay rights are not accepted, they will have that flag waving to show like, this is what America's all about. And it's just like, at least we're not speaking German.
We shouldn't need to do that though. Like there's nothing wrong with being gay, I don't think, but it's like, why does it have to be like front page news? Like, why does that have to be like the cover?
It is a greater example of United States power than the actual United States flag. Because if someone like me or someone maybe even like you waved an American flag and got the shit beaten out of us by Antifa or Black Lives Matter protesters, that would be swept under the rug. Action would very likely not be taken. Whereas a gay couple could wave their pride flag, and if they even had it reported missing,
it's a hate crime,
front page, we're talking about it for months, it'll probably even be written about in textbooks, because that is a greater example of the United States power as defined by who has the power in the institutions and the predominant social trends than the actual U.S. flag.
That's so true.
The
pride flag is stronger than the American flag, because like it's wild. Like, wow, I'm like realizing, especially last couple of years, I'm like the American flag is now it's like a political item. It's like a divisive, I'm not even like using the right word, but it's like, it's a thing that we can have arguments about, which is like fucking crazy, you know?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because every like little thing, whether it's the $20 bill or the American flag, oh, the monuments, oh, whatever, it's just one little thing. But it's like, it's not actually. I mean, you know, maybe in the grand scheme of things they're little, but every little thing chips away at the idea of the American culture and the old American identity. And, you know, the flag changes, everything changes. We have nothing to which to tie ourselves. And then eventually we won't be able to argue the same way with gender against like this new concept of America. 1 billion Americans, we're all living together with multi-cultures and multi-ethnic and whatever. And we're all tied together because we buy the same products from Amazon and we like different types of food. And like, that's our purpose, to basically
we all know what WAP is.
Yeah. We all exist together in the same continent. And the only thing we have in common is that we have nothing in common, but it's okay because we're all going to stand in line together at Walmart and we're all going to listen to the same recycled, degenerate music that artificially inflates our pride and makes us feel as though we're not so down. And then we're all going to eat food from a Chinese restaurant and pretend that we're cultured. That's it. That's our purpose. That's why my grandfather went over there and liberated Dachau. That's why he watched his friends get like mauled to death by MG42s, so that his grandson could live in that country and then he wouldn't have to speak German. That's why I did it.
I'm just like blown away by your parents are your parents proud of you?
Yeah, my dad is. My mom was hesitant because she doesn't know anything about politics. But my dad was like, actually, no, other way around. My dad was skeptical, and then he realized I'm a genius, and then he was like in favor. My mom was like, you know, naively mom, like, oh, go do it, you know, things like that. And then, yeah, she's basically like kept that up a little bit. But it's funny too, because she'll ask me, I didn't go to college. She'll ask me too sometimes, because she doesn't understand how like this business, so to speak, works. And so, you know, do you ever?
What is this business? The content creating business?
Political commentary, content creation, things like that. It is a business, and it's weird to describe it as such. And
right,
Elijah,
you're a brand. You're like, yeah. And
Elijah actually has helped me a lot with the business end of things, which I'm incredibly grateful to him for that.
He's a boss.
He's
great.
So generous, the nicest person. He gets so much crap too.
I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't like him. Like, we were in the snow the other day. He literally pulled his car over, which we didn't know would be okay in the snow, to help push another car out of the snow. Like, without question, boom, he was already pulling over.
I was in an Uber with him. I moved in on a Monday night. We got here late. It was like 9:00 p.m. He's got work tomorrow. He shows up helps me move everything to my 3rd floor apartment. Then we go to Cidercade, which is an arcade that serves hard cider. We're in the Uber, and he just starts talking to the Uber driver. Turns out, I won't give her, well, she's anonymous, so I guess I can. This woman is like, yeah, this woman is a recovering like heroin addict. She has like multiple children with multiple husbands. She's been like physically abused. She's been like trying to kill herself. And this guy like literally starts praying for her and talking to her about that and getting her to like open up. And she, you know, it was interesting. We got
in the Uber.
Yeah. And you know, it kind of made me think about like, how am I conducting myself throughout the world? Because I get in the car with her and I'm, hi, how you doing? And I stop talking. She seemed a little grouchy. So I was like, oh, what's her problem? He starts talking to her. I'm like, oh, that's her problem. Like, people have it like really hard. And he like got this lady to like open up.
How did he get it out of her? Yeah. What was like the thing?
I mean, I don't know, but like he was just talking and like asking questions, and he started like praying for her and asking her about her relationship with God. And she was telling us how, you know, she's angry at God because she feels as though the things that she's had to go through are like unfair, which is understandable. You know, we have those moments where we're like shaking our fist and we're angry at existence and our creator and things like that. But I mean, I told him that when we got out of the car, we're walking, I'm like, you probably just changed that person's life. And he's like, maybe. Like, it doesn't even like mean anything to him. Like, he's just seriously the most like helpful and genuine person. And so many people on like the farther right give him crap because, you know, there's a certain far right figure who had a falling out with him, and so all of his fans like don't like him. But he's seriously like the nicest guy. Nick Fuentes.
Oh, okay. I feel like I should have known about this, but oh well.
So they give him a lot of crap. But he's seriously like the nicest, most genuine guy.
For real. Like so nice, so endlessly gracious and giving.
Yeah, you came in here. We were doing a Bible study. He's like singing and he's teaching us about the Bible as young men, and just like, what else can we say? You know,
was this your first because I walked in, you guys, I was like, I've never experienced anything like this, and I was raised like Methodist, went to church every Sunday, was confirmed, and that was it. Like we literally, I was the youngest of 3 kids when I got confirmed. Like that was the end of church for us. And so like I came in and you guys are like, yeah, like singing, someone's playing a guitar, and I was like, I just never been to like an adult Bible study before. Was this your first time?
Not exactly. I think this is probably the best one I've gone to because it was like legitimate. Whereas, speaking of the devil, he mentioned, the first thing he mentioned was that one of the most common thing that it says in the Bible, not the most important, like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, but the most common thing that said is that you should like sing to God, to like pay tribute. And so he was like, we want to open up with like singing to God. And so,
wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, neither did I. And he said, you know, he warned us that his voice wasn't that good. So I was like, it's all right, you know, guys being dudes. Then he's like singing, is like a beautiful voice, frankly. And he's like singing, and we're all singing together, just having, you know, paying tribute to God. And that's how we opened. And then we read, I think, the first 11 verses of Romans 5. And we talked about that verse by verse, like what it means, how it applies to our own life. Is like a very good Bible study. Whereas, you know, the most Bible studies that or I guess the most common type of Bible study that I've listened to was a bunch of divorced moms getting together and holding Bibles while they disparage their ex-husbands. I had to go through a lot of that growing up.
Well, it's less reading.
Yeah,
and, you know.
And so that was my whole frame of reference for a Bible study. And I just thought it was like really dumb. But this was good.
Why did you guys start with Romans, or did he just like know how to start?
Well, he had experience with that. He's a youth pastor. He was a youth pastor. And so I deferred to his leadership, and he did a great job. And so, yeah, he wanted to start with that. And also because I just put out the pornography video, I think there was something in there roughly that could tie back to that. But yeah, it was
pornography commentary video.
Right.
It's so interesting because like what's really amazing about this video is that you did, it's like most of us here, like minimum here, all right, get off porn. And you're like, you know, why? Yeah. And you've actually given like really concrete evidence. And I don't know how long you must have spent a long time researching this, but like as a woman, it's like, well, you're like, if you're in the porn industry, and I have friends who are porn stars. I interview a lot of them all the time.
Which ones?
Oh God. I mean, like name one. I don't know.
I don't know any.
Oh God, like Jaden Cole, Randy James, Brandy Love, Karma RX, Emma Hicks. Oh my God, like really, I have lists and lists.
It was funny. My roommate, he was helping me make the thumbnail, and I was like, I need like a girl who's, you know, giving like a look to the camera, but you know, I don't know what to look up. And he was like giving me all these names, and I was like, you know, you need to watch this video, right? She's like, I know, it's fucked up.
But the thing is, if you're a woman who's like involved in the professional porn industry, or if you're just dabbling in OnlyFans trying to pay rent by selling pictures of your asshole, like you're gonna be like, no, why would I give this up? Like it's so lucrative, and if you're deeply in it, like if you're a legit porn star, like there's kind of no exit plan. Like you're kind of black marked. And your stuff is out there, and it's like you're probably not going to be hired by like a regular company because they're going to just Google you up.
That's probably true. I think that it's almost a double-edged sword in that now, because the society and the culture have become so open towards that sort of thing, there almost is, I would imagine, a more viable route out now than there was 30 years ago.
Because you could claim like whatever, you could claim like discrimination or something,
or like if,
right?
you know, some girl's like 25, she's working in HR, and, you know, she Googles you and sees you're a porn star, and, you know, she's a feminist, she's gonna be like, oh, that's empowering. She's not gonna like discriminate against you or something like that. But yeah, you're probably right in that, but I don't know. It's probably
like, are you gonna get a job like working in HR? Are you gonna get a job like working like at a hedge fund? It's like,
yeah, hedge fund manager, former porn star.
Yeah. And like with dudes, it's like you tell a dude like stop watching porn. It's like, well, like you were saying in your video, like your brain chemistry has been like your brain has been altered sometimes, oftentimes permanently, and there's no substitute. It's like in what you were explaining in your video, it's like your brain has been rewired to like to the extent like, whereas if you feel anxious or weird, like you'll get horny, and like, which is so fascinating. I don't think enough people are aware of that.
So weird. And that was why I tried to like give examples, because, you know, I've had friends of mine that'll tell me like, you know, I was like hooking up with this girl, and I think I need to get like a Viagra prescription because, like, you know, I just got like soft halfway through, and it's like, you know, that's not supposed to happen. Like a 20-year-old guy with like a hot girl, like that is not supposed to happen. There's a reason that's happening. It's because your dopamine levels, which are required to sustain sexual arousal and erection in the hypothalamus of your brain, you need like adequate dopamine levels in order to like literally get your dick up. And so what happens is dopamine surges for novelty, but it'll also, or no, when you have expectations for something and it exceeds your expectations, whatever that thing is, your dopamine will increase if it exceeds it, but it'll also decrease if your dopamine, or if that thing is lower than what your expectations were. And so as a man, when you're like 11 years old.
So like regular women are not going to measure up to porn stars.
Never. It's impossible, especially if you're 11 years old, which is the average age at which men are being exposed to this type of pornography, which means then, assuming a normal distribution, that half is even younger when they're exposed to it.
Wow.
That a real woman is never going to meet that expectation, because you've got all the novelty, you've got these like weird scenarios, that, you know, whatever. And so then when you actually, you know, interact with a real woman in that capacity, it's not going to meet that level, and you're not going to be able to sustain yourself for like the actual interaction. It's
like she's not in a cage. I can't get hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's not.
There isn't a chain around her neck.
She doesn't have cat ears. She doesn't have a tail. You know, people are that's why furries are a thing now.
Why? I mean, I know that furries are a thing, of course, but like, because
they have conditioned their sexuality to be wired so that they need like this weird animal thing to like get off to. There's no furry gene. You can't explain that scientifically with like, oh, you know, humans breeded with animals, and it's like that doesn't exist. There's got to be some weird thing. And coincidentally, it coincides with the rise of this degenerate and deviant porn cultures. Like all of a sudden people are like identifying as furries. And if you talk to some of these people too, I don't know your circle, but if you talk to furries, they will identify more as a furry than they will as even heterosexual or homosexual. Like that is their identity. Like a furry is.
Wow. Yeah, that's their group.
Yeah. So
how, when did you become really activated into free speech? Does it go hand in hand with just having conservative beliefs?
No, probably in high school, because that's when people really started to push back at me. And so then and that's the thing too, being an activist or being in support of free speech is good in principle, but the sort of passion that you see with the right for being in favor of free speech is equal to that.
There's like a tiny flying something.
Is equal to that of the people on the left who were proponents of free speech in, you know, the 1960s, the 1970s, because it's indicative of who has the power. People in power don't care about free speech because they have the power. And so right now, conservatives and the right don't have the power. And so coincidentally, we want to keep our seat at the table. And so we're in favor of free speech, which I think is a good thing, to be in favor of free speech. But what I will say is that in the 60s, when the liberals were promoting free speech, it wasn't because we were censoring their views and we didn't want them to talk about what if we had a welfare state. It was because they wanted to introduce things into society that typically weren't talked about because it was considered rude, or it was considered, you know, you just don't talk about things like that, sexual immodesty, things like that. Well, no, man, it's free speech. It's a free love and things like that. And so conservatives and, you know, traditional Americans were like, oh, I suppose this is true. And so we allowed them to have a seat at the table. They infiltrated the institutions, and now they're kicking us out. And we're like, well, now wait a minute. I thought you liked free speech. And they're like, yeah, fuck you. And so they're just going to kick us out.
It wasn't about equality. It was about taking over.
Never. And that's the thing. It always is. It always is. You know?
I'm fascinated. So how religious would you say that you are?
Very.
Very. Do you feel like people need to have God in their life to feel fulfilled? And how, like that woman in the cab is like such a good example. Someone who's not religious, or they were maybe raised with it, but they've spent like decades, you know, away from it. You say, oh, what's your relationship with God? People freak out. They back away. They're like, all right, bye. See you later. Do you feel like people need to have God in their life, or like God specifically, or could it be like source, the universe, like believing in a thing greater than themselves? Do you feel like this is critical for feeling fulfilled?
That's the thing, is like, you know, you'll ask people, are you religious? And they'll have that reaction that you gave. And they're like, okay, well, what's your theory on existence? And they'll tell you that they believe in astrology, or they believe in NASA and science. Whatever they tell you is ultimately a religious devotion. So it's not that we've like lost God. We've lost like that sort of
trust the science is a perfect example, because that's people will just believe that blindly.
So they're looking for a way to explain the universe, but they reject the authority of something like Christianity because frankly, it requires more of them to like not do the things that they've been conditioned to like doing, whether that be, you know, sexual deviancy, drugs, whatever, party culture, sin in general, vice. And so they would rather put their faith into something like astrology, which happens with a lot of young white women, these weird pagan things.
Guilty.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know like what it is, but I don't think that it's necessarily, you know, required to have meaning, but I think that your meaning in life will only be optimized with something like religion, or even like having faith in the idea of like a creator in general, because otherwise, even if you trust the science, like if I went upstairs and I got the Beretta and I like shot your head and then you painted the wall, that would really be no difference than like me crushing this cup, because it's just like matter and molecules moving in different directions, right? Like you have, there's no difference. That's
like a serial killer.
There's no difference. Okay, in Minecraft, there's no difference, because it's just matter and exactly. Yeah. It's just matter and particles and molecules. It has no significance greater than that. So the only way that it could is if there were something immaterial that transcended us, like as you know, carbon beings or whatever. A soul. Yeah, exactly. And that requires some sort of like religious component. And I think that as we've lost God in the West, particularly, we've lost that sort of sense of meaning, which is why COVID was such an effective thing to get people to freak out and to control them, because everybody is afraid to die. And so you tell them, hey,
because they're less religious, right?
Because they don't think anything's going to happen afterwards. They think that their existence is impermanent. They don't believe in an afterlife. They don't believe that they're going to a place, whether that's a better or worse place. They think that like, this is it. And they have no concept of anything greater than that because they've been made to lose faith in like a God.
And I've never been afraid like at all of the COVID thing. Because it's like, you know what, like if I'm meant to die by this, like I'm meant to die by this, but it's like, I can't vibe with like wearing a mask unless I absolutely have to, like on a plane or whatever, to come here.
Yeah. I'm not like afraid to, I would just prefer not to.
Yeah,
especially if it were in a dumb way. Like I'd be so mad if I got shot by like some like Antifa guy, or someone brought a knife to one of my speeches one time.
What? Where were you?
University of Marquette in Wisconsin. And I like at the time I told myself like I'd take a knife for the movement. You know, I'd be on Sean Hannity the next day, like the liberals have lost their mind. You know, total just saying exactly.
Chipstick scars.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'd be so mad if I died in like a dumb way like that.
Like what, of COVID or of like somebody,
someone kills me. Yeah. If I got murdered for something stupid, I'd be mad. I think about that, but I'm not like afraid to like die per se, but like dying in a way that's like, you know, and this sounds wrong, but my roommate said this the other day, and I think this is totally true. There's something as a man that's just like very undignifying about like being murdered. Not any disrespect to people who have been murdered, but like, you know, if someone comes up to you randomly, like Elijah had a gun pointed at his face, if that guy would have like shot him, like it's just, there's something about that.
Because it's out of your control, I think.
Yeah. Like, it's almost better to have the gun pointed at your face and to have like a second or two and just say like, fuck you, and then get shot. Like you have like control over that in a different way. There's almost more dignity to that. That's why I've said before, I don't like the way the death penalty is executed now, pun intended, where, you know, the lethal injection thing. I'd rather like, I think what I said is I'd rather go out like on my feet, T-posing and like saying like the N-word or something, just like make people mad.
Just say the things you've always wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Just like one last way to just like stick it to the man or something before I'm executed in the FEMA camps. Yeah.
I hope that's not where we're headed. I don't know. There is a big pendulum starting to swing back. A big pendulum. There's a big swinging back. I've noticed, like, you know, people such as yourself, even like kids younger than you, are just not about the woke culture, because they see it in their teachers, and their teachers aren't cool, and they want to be cool. So it's like, it's weird. It's like they're rebelling from wokeism almost back to conservatism, which is pretty cool to see. Do you have hope for the future? It sounds like maybe less so.
I feel an obligation well, this isn't my show, so I can be honest. When I do my show, I feel like I have to leave on a high note, but I will say that I see no trends that suggest that we're going to be okay. That's from a purely secular perspective. My belief is basically that like the end times are approaching unironically, and that everything's going to collapse, but it's going to be okay for those who have faith. That's like my real thoughts on it. But as far as like politically, I think that we're kind of done, unless, and that's the other thing too, like, you know, there's the meme that goes around, or I guess the photo, it's not exactly funny, that's the cycle of history is such that strong men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. I think that history suggests that we could bounce back from the state that we're in. The problem is, though, for the first time in the history of the world, they've been able to mobilize and employ things like vice and pornography, marijuana, all these different things to like pacify people and make them numb, while stripping sense of identity and nation and community and God, anything that would literally give a man like the infrastructure and the purpose and the drive to like do something and become that strong man. That's all been like robbed from him. And so I don't think that right now the dominoes are in place to really bounce back from this, which would be a shame. It would be a shame. Not the preferred outcome for this timeline.
And I see like the sort of like the equal and opposite, like female, like you talk about like, all right, this is the effect on men. Like think about like hookup culture as it serves or doesn't serve women. It's like, as soon as a woman like, you know, texts too much or becomes a little bit clingy, which is like you get attached. Like it's your nature to be like, oh, you fall in love. You want to nurture, you want to, right, whatever. And so it's like you call, you text, but it's like you're not texting back. Well, this is just my nature. I'm getting attached. Like I want to love, I want to have a family, or I want to at least like get married, or even just partner up with the same person.
That's what's so interesting about the mainstream feminist narrative, is because on the one hand, it'll tell men that you're not expressing enough emotion, you're afraid to open up. But those same people, when it comes to their sexual interactions, they elevate pacifism and apathy to the highest level. It's cool to be calloused. It's cool to be able to hook up with whoever.
To have no feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. And it's because their brains have been rotted by SSRIs.
And I was like I was so in that phase of like, I remember, and I talked about this on other episodes, like I had a month where I was in between relationships, got out of a really toxic one. There was a month where I think I slept with like 30 people.
Wow.
And I just was scheduling it in, and it was like, oh, I got such a high from it. It was like this feeling. I was like, oh, my Google Calendar, like I'm just I felt like desirable. I was like, I'm achieving a lot. It was like I was feeling, but it was very much like a drug, because as soon as like one was over, I would like dip down. I would get really, it was not sustainable.
Yeah, you're chasing that validation. Like I'm validated by the fact that these men like want to insert themselves into me. And that's what happens with like a lot of women, is maybe they have their heart broken or something, and there's that gap in validation, and they seek that in the only way that it's available to them, which is like through those casual interactions.
I don't know.
20 in a month. I was gonna add it with 30. Like, was it February? Like, what's the average per day?
I think it was 20 people in a month. Like two chicks and 18, whatever. I'll just check my files, but yeah, I think it was 20. It's irrelevant. I just was like, I hadn't thought about it in a while.
Yeah.
I totally interrupted you.
I don't even remember what I was saying. I was just thinking 20 in a month. That's insane.
It was the apps. It was like I was on like just a bunch of different apps, and this was also before like I had any like my comedy career took off. I didn't have a podcast. And it's like this perfect drug of like it like fills your holes. No, well, I guess pun intended, pun not intended. Like all that validation, right? That I definitely can get to a place where I was like very like an addict about it. You're like, you just got to chase the next feeling of feeling desired, whatever. But what I wasn't focusing on was like not my comedy at all, not my career. Like I was building no other parts of myself up. It was a huge distraction. It covers everything.
Yeah, that tends to happen to women too, who have poor relationships with their father, just because
ding, ding, ding.
they didn't have that male presence in their lives, and so they've always sort of like sought that. And the only way that it's easily available to them is through interactions like that with men who just want to exploit them.
Yeah, because you learn one way or another, like, okay, this is where I have power. This is where I feel powerful, like in general in life. But this is also like how I can like connect with guys. It's like, oh, just like, sucking dick and traveling. Yeah.
So true. So true. And that's the other thing that's interesting too about hookup culture, is like women feel as though they now are like empowering themselves because they're choosing to be used. It's like, yeah, the guy's still using me, but it's okay because I know it this time.
It's like, you lose in that situation every time, because it's like, now I look back on my 20s and I go, I really should have been using that time, like really should have been thinking about what do I really want in a guy. And like every guy I meet who's not that is not worth your time. Like it's just straight up a waste of your time. Like, and now I go, it's like, yeah, I could have gotten like whatever dick I wanted. Great. Go for the dick that's like attached to a really great guy. You know, like you can be choosy. It's like, you're not, that's not a.
You seem to have a very like dick-centered worldview.
I do. I have a dick-centric theology.
The consequences of feminism yet again.
Well, for sure, because that was me. I was like I came out guns blazing feminist, like right out of college, and it took like years of just knocking around, like living life, like maturing, being like, oh, like it was just sort of like flaking off, and like it didn't prepare me for life. It didn't make me feel like a strong person. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you're a girl in your 20s, like you're not missing, because honestly, I could have. I think 40 of the dicks I've had, I could have, you know what I mean? They start to repeat each other. There's basically like 10 types of guys you can hook up with. So you don't need to do 4 rounds of that. You know,
so that's how I feel about women. It's like women are, I never understood like I love women. I cherish women. But as far as like interacting with women, I feel like there's like maybe about 10 types as far as like, there's a range of conversations and takes that they'll, especially young women, like when they get to be about your age,
even less probably. Yeah,
it's like you have experience and insight into things, but young women are basically like, have you ever seen those memes where they'll be like, we let a robot watch 10 episodes of The Office and now it writes its own? Talking to women my age is like we let a woman on twitter.com for 10 minutes and now she's going to talk to you. Like that's what it sounds like.
But it's just like regurgitating
everything that they're incapable of like original thought. It's just kind of like, all right, cool. Or maybe it's what their professors are saying.
Do you think the young men, they're the same age, are the same way, or do you think it's a specifically female thing?
I think that women tend to be more mediocre. They take the middle. Young men are either like uber retarded or like geniuses. Women tend to be much more concentrated.
Because we have the people-pleasing, agreeable gene.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, like the dudes that I talk to are either like, uber high IQ, like just like, yeah, I was looking at this essay on Fight Club from a Nietzschean philosophical perspective, or they'll just be like, dude, let's go get some puss, bro. Like there's very little.
I would hang out with both those guys. I would hook up with both of those.
The dudes, the Nietzschean dudes aren't going to want to hook up with you.
No.
They're going to be disciplined. They're going to resist the 37-year-old dick-centered woman.
I'm not dick-centered anymore. I'm very much focused on the same dick the last 6 years. So that's why I've had time to develop other traits.
It's still okay, never mind. Good for you.
I'm still, yeah, oh sure. Because I still was that person. I feel like I see the culture in like a broader way. Yeah. Shouldn't we all be dick-centered? No, I didn't. Sorry if this got too gross and too sexual. You guys are used to it if you're fans of this podcast. Anyway, John, you're a blast. I feel like I could easily talk to
Thank you.
3 hours.
I have that effect on women.
You're great. Where can people there's people coming. Where can people find you, follow you, support you, check out your videos?
You can go to youtube.com/John Doyle. You can go to hackoffcomedy.com. That's my website. Instagram is @johndoyle.jpg. You can't find me on Twitter because I was banned because I told people to call their congressman. Oops.
You really got banned from that?
Literally, yeah. Yeah, what happened is, because how Twitter, if someone posts a video of like someone being murdered or like child pornography or something, a lot of people would mass flag that. And so the system has an automated ban so that to control for things like that in case like a human can't, review it. They want it off the website. And so what happened is I posted Google Docs with the names and publicly available like office phone numbers of people who are serving in Congress in Michigan, Wisconsin, all those states. And I said, hey, call your congressman. And so a bunch of leftists got their audiences, like streamers got their audiences to go mass flag those tweets, which resulted in an automated ban. And Twitter's Twitter, so they want to be gone.
Flag for what? Hate speech?
No, flag for spam and harassment. And so then I appealed it. 8 weeks later, they got back with me and said, "Go fuck yourself." So yeah, I'm not going to get my Twitter back because I mean I have alt accounts. How do you
feel about that? Are you okay?
I'm good. No, because really what I like about Twitter is just like tweeting whatever stupid thing comes to mind. And I have alt accounts with like following. I won't say what they are.
Good. Okay, I was gonna say you could do that.
I'm not off Twitter by any means.
Okay, good.
So, but that's where to find like this version of John Doyle. That would be where.
Which you should all go and find it. Yes,
so
hackoffcomedy.com. So and definitely if you're a dude, I would highly recommend watching this porn video that you put out. It's
commentary video.
Porn commentary video. It's like an hour
and 43 minutes, I think.
It's long. It's a doozy, but it's really worth it just because there's nothing. I haven't seen anything else like it out there. And it hits a different part of your brain. John, thank you so much. You're a delight. You're a wonderful young man. I'm very proud of you. other ant things. Thanks, guys. Bye.